Welcome to the Local Housing Strategy briefing on Main Issue 3, Promoting Independent Living. It considers the factors which influence the role of specialist housing in meeting the needs of residents and communities across Shetland. It looks at the suitability of the current housing stock and examines how people can be supported to live independently and well in their own homes and communities. It examines the needs of a range of groups, including older people and those who require adapted or supported housing. The Local Housing Strategy will set out the vision for housing supply and housing services in Shetland over the next 5 years. To build a new local housing strategy, Shetland Islands Council and partners must set a new vision for homes and communities and set out priorities for action to tackle the main housing issues locally. Based on analysis of the local housing system in Shetland, it is proposed that the new local housing strategy is developed around the following 4 main issues. 1. Housing supply and placemaking. 2. House condition, energy efficiency and fuel poverty. 3. Promoting independent living. And 4. Homelessness and housing options. This briefing sets out the evidence, insight and questions on the key issues which will influence decision making on promoting independent living. This briefing on promoting independent living sets out the evidence and facts on the need for adapted, amenity, supported, wheelchair, age-exclusive and other forms of specialist housing. It sets out a starting position for decisions on how the new local housing strategy should enable the delivery of specialist housing and support services. It raises questions and sets out the evidence on the profile and effectiveness of specialist housing provision in meeting housing need, evidence of housing unsuitability and unmet need for specialist housing provision, the role of aids and adaptations in enabling independent living, requirements for wheelchair, adapted or amenity provision, and the current and future housing needs of older people in Shetland. It also provides a reminder on what housing contributions is to the integrated health and social care priorities are for Shetland. So let's start with the Housing Contribution Statement. The Housing Contribution Statement is a statutory requirement to involve housing services in the integration of health and social care to support the achievement of national health and wellbeing outcomes. The Housing Contribution Statement serves as a key link between the Strategic Commissioning Plan and the Local Housing Strategy. The current Shetland Islands Health and Social Care Partnership Joint Commissioning Plan spans 2019 to 2022 and incorporates the Housing Contribution Statement dated March 2019. There are a number of housing contributions to integration, and these include to develop better shared service assessment processes with health and care teams, reviewing the housing allocations policy to ensure that it continues to match people with housing that is suitable for their needs, to record and analyse a range of data and indicators on housing need, demand and provision to provide a robust baseline of future and anticipated needs, developing a housing options approach which would assist with longer term planning and anticipating future need by fostering a prevention early intervention approach to housing need, to increase the number of accessible homes in the Council's housing stock, encourage future housing supply that is the right size and in the right location across all tenures, to move away from sheltered housing and very sheltered housing labels to provide more flexible solutions through accessible housing, homes with support and homes for life. With an anticipated increase in the number of adaptations required, the range and flexibility of adaptations should be reviewed to enable choices and to allow for future planning to happen as early as practicable. Integrating telecare and telehealth technology within the provisions of adaptations, the review and development of the handyman service across all tenures, and to provide a flexible and adaptable housing support service in all localities. There are 546 units of specialist housing stock held by Shetland Islands Council and Shetland Housing Association across Shetland, representing just over 20% of the total social housing sector stock. Combining both council and housing association lets, there have been 170 lets to specialist housing over the last 3 years. That equates to around a quarter of total lets over the same 3-year period, with Shetland Islands Council accounting for 97% of specialist lets. The Shetland Council Housing Waiting List identifies applicants with particular needs and health-related conditions which can be adversely affected by their housing circumstances. As of March 2021, there were 692 active applicants on the housing waiting list. Of the 692 applicants, 552, 80%, would be considered for general needs housing, leaving 140 applicants who have a particular housing requirement. Of the 692 applicants, 207, 30%, have been awarded medical points, ranging from 20 to 100 points. As part of the 2021 LHS survey, local residents were asked to list their top 5 housing challenges for Shetland. 31 of the 227 respondents, 13.7%, thought a lack of accessible housing options for people with health problems or disabilities, including wheelchair, sheltered or adapted housing, was a top 5 challenge. Shetland Islands Council and Shetland Housing Association both provide aid and adaptations to their tenants. The Council meets the full costs from the Housing Revenue Account, and the Housing Association receives Scottish Government Stage 3 grant funding and supplements this with their own budgetary position. Over the last 2 years, £369,000 has been spent on aid and adaptations in the social housing sector. Both the Council and Housing Association's average time to complete adaptations is significantly below the Scottish average. Shetland Housing Association operates the one-stop shop that provides services to private sector homeowners to receive assistance with disabled adaptations and repairs and maintenance to their properties. Since 2017, £723,000 of funding has enabled 106 households to Based on evidence from Shetland's housing waiting list, 11 applicants need wheelchair accessible or wheelchair adapted housing, with the majority of these applicants requesting Lerwick and Bressie as their preferred area. Almost all of the wheelchair applicants are single people. The average waiting time for these applicants was 1.3 years as at the 31st of March 2021. In 2019, the Scottish Government issued guidance to all local authorities requiring them to confirm LHS targets to support the delivery of more wheelchair accommodation across all tenures. Shetland Islands Council's 2021 to 2026 Strategic Housing Investment Plan did not include a wheelchair target, as the expectation is this will be informed by the refresh of the local housing strategy. The SHIP acknowledges the difficulty in setting targets in island areas for specific types of property to meet particular needs due to the very small numbers across a dispersed geography. However, by applying a 3.5% target to the SHIP total of 316 units, this would deliver 11 wheelchair homes over the plan's period, but that only addresses existing need in the social rented sector. Despite an overall decline in population of 6% projected between 2018 and 2043, the older people population is expected to substantially increase over the same period, with a projected increase of the 66 to 84 population of 25% and a projected increase of 115% in the 85 plus age group. This will inevitably lead to an increasing demand for housing or housing support for older people in the next 10 to 20 years. The projected increase in older people is expected across all housing market areas in Shetland. With only around 40 shelter homes being available to let in an average year, this increase in population will necessitate the need for new accessible housing to be built, as well as increases in the provision of adaptations to meet people's needs in their existing homes. Despite an overall decline in population of 6% projected between 2018 and 2043 in Shetland, the older people population is expected to substantially increase over the same period, with a projected increase of the 66 to 84 population of 25% and a projected increase of 115% in the 85 plus age group. This will inevitably lead to an increasing demand for housing or housing support for older people in the next 10 to 20 years. The projected increase in older people is expected across all housing market areas in Shetland. With only around 40 sheltered homes being available for let in an average year, this increase in population will necessitate the need for new accessible housing to be built, as well as increases in the provision of adaptations to meet people's needs in their existing home. From 2011 to 2017, there was a steady decline in the number of home care clients in Shetland. This decline brought Shetland into line with the Scottish average for the number of home care clients aged 65 plus per thousand of population. However, in more recent years, there is a growing population of households receiving care and support services to enable them to remain at home. Over the last 3 years, the number of households receiving care at home has increased in every category, including home care, 353 households in 2021, telecare, 756 households in 2021, and personal care, 300 households in 2021. The largest population of service users are those using telecare services. The evidence would suggest that telecare and telehealth services are increasingly important in supporting frail households in Shetland. Over 3/4 of service users are aged 75 plus. This briefing paper for promoting independent living identifies a range of key issues which should be given careful consideration in the development of the new local housing strategy, including there are currently 546 units of specialist housing stock across Shetland. More than half of specialist housing is sheltered housing stock. Evidence that approximately 150 households in Shetland require specialist forms of housing. The impact of investment in property aids and adaptations across Shetland in enabling local households with physical disabilities to live independently and well. Evidence of an estimated requirement of 11 units of wheelchair accommodation across Shetland in the social rented sector. The impact of substantial growth in the population of older people living in Shetland and the potential impact on demand for specialist housing as well as care and support services. The trend in home care and telecare and how this will be impacted with the population projections. To build a new local housing strategy, Shetland Islands Councils needs to prioritise the main housing issues that need to be tackled to set local priorities that will guide action, partnership and investment moving forward. This briefing has focused on specialist housing provision in Shetland, presenting evidence on the extent and nature of the problem. The purpose of the LHS conference is to finalise the main housing issues that require intervention in Shetland, examine the main issues in detail and generate ideas for action and investment. Key issues for consideration in the Promoting Independent Living workshop are: is improving the supply of specialist housing and promoting independent living a local housing strategy priority? What are the main challenges we face in improving specialist provision and enabling independent living in Shetland? And what's been proven to work, and what are our priorities for action?